Okay, believe it's no, it's November 28th. There we go. It's November 28th. It's about 5:10. I've started tearing the motor back apart every now and then, as you can see. Turbo's out. The radiator's out. I had to take the radiator out in order to get the turbo and the manifold out. It's one unit. I don't want to do anything by taking them separate. I've had a request on how to do a cylinder head removal while the engine's in the car. Basically, first of all, you're going to want to drain the oil and the coolant. So, I've done both. With mine, I've cut the filter open and it's clean. There's some gray metallic looking stuff that's kind of grayish black, but it's not any chunks of metal, so I know the bearings are okay. So, like I said before, first, drain your coolant and oil. You're going to want to take the radiator out of the way. That'll help give you room. You're going to need to take the alternator belt off, which is back in there. You're going to need to also take your power steering belt and AC belt off. If you don't have AC, just the power steering belt. The power steering bracket, or the power steering, has one bolt on the back, you see. And then it's got two more bolts. One here, another one on the opposite location, just about 130 degrees out. Those you'll have to reach through the holes here. And the best way to do that is to get the belt out of your way, which undo your tensioner and then take the belt out of your way. And then that comes out, and then there's three bolts that hold the bracket in, and one goes into the engine mount bracket here, which you have to take off anyway, so that it has to come out of the way. There's one here, there is one here, as you can see, and then the other one, I believe, is down in here. It's on the front side of the bracket. You can kind of see it there next to the water pump pulley. So once you get that out of your way, you can then go ahead and work on the exhaust. Get the exhaust manifold out of the way. If you have the stock manifold on, you're going to have I believe 10 millimeter to take the shield off, and then you can access the bolts to the head for the exhaust manifold. Take that out of the way, and you're going to the two bolts that go from the manifold, I think it's 2 or 4, from the exhaust manifold to the downpipe, if you have the factory one, do have a tendency to rust and seize. And if you try to get too much torque on them, they break off. So a lot of penetrant is going to be your best friend. A lot of it. And then my motor, as you can see, I have a different intake manifold. I would highly suggest don't try to take the intake manifold off in the car unless you absolutely have to. I usually take the intake manifold off with the cylinder head, and then I can work on it on a bench and then take it off from there instead of trying to waste time and getting all frustrated with it in the car. You're going to also need to disconnect any vacuum hoses, like this one here, any that are on the back of the manifold. If you got a turbo system set up like I do, it's basically pretty much straightforward. Just you have a little few extra things. I have to disconnect an oil line, drain line or return line, some charge pipes, like the cold side charge pipe here, the discharge hot side before it goes in the intercooler, that had to come out. Basically at this point, you can go ahead. I've already got my timing cover off because I did a compression test and didn't want to put it back on all the way. Will warn you, the 2 out of these 3 bolts are a pain to get out on the front cover here. So the bolt that is, see if I can get where my pinky is, that bolt, you have to lift the whole motor up and off. Use a block of wood underneath the oil pan use a jack, and then from there, take a 17 millimeter head socket, take this bolt out, and then these two are 17 millimeters, so I'll take those out, take the mount out of the way. Then you can lift it up, and then these 3 bolts that hold the front mount to the engine are 15 millimeters. Get those loosened up out of the way, and then this bottom one here, you'll lift the engine up. You might have to feed it through these lines here. One's evap, another one's, I believe, power steering, maybe. Yeah, one's power steering, and there's another one, I don't know what it is off the top of my head. The top one that's right underneath, right there. That one comes out flawlessly. The one that is really the pain is the one I don't have in right now. You can see where it is, right near the alternator, just below the cam gears down here. That one is such a pain. I will tell you, the best way is just to loosen it, get the motor up as high as you can without breaking any lines or anything, or any hoses, and then kind of take them out, bring it up a little bit, and kind of wiggle it in a certain way to get it around the timing belt, and it should come free. You may have to finagle it, get the engine in the right position, lower it, heighten it. Just make sure you don't stress any wires or anything like that, otherwise it may or may not come out, or you may just end up breaking something else. I'm at the stage where I can go ahead, and then once you get that mount out, there's 2 10 millimeter bolts at the bottom just below the crankshaft that come out. But before you can get to them, you have to take the harmonic balancer off, and you need a special removal tool. Unfortunately, I don't have that tool here with me. It's basically a 3-leg with different length pins that go in the center, because if you use the one with the cone, all you're doing is putting the pressure on the harmonic balancer hole on the balancer itself, and it won't come off. So you need to have the special puller, and it should come right off, and then you'll be able to get 2 10 mils for the cover, and then there will be a 10 mil on here if you have the whole factory cover. If you have just the back cover on or no cover at all, then you'll have to figure the way out. But if you have the front section of the cover, which is the facing, just take that off. If you have no cover, then you can skip the step. Usually if you have to do a head, I would highly suggest this would be the best time to do your time belt as well, because it'll save you time from going back in and doing anything like that again for a period of time, unless you have a catastrophic failure. Oh, I forgot, there is another bolt, another 17 millimeter bolt. These are studs here that goes in here, but that one is in one of my cups here that I use for sorting. So that's where I pretty much sit. I'm basically at the point where I'm ready. Now we can disconnect anything we need to on the harnesses, like your gauge, your ECT temp gauge, your ECT sensor for the computer, or anything that's really going to be in your way. Disconnect the master fuel injector harness connector, which is down over in here. It's a pretty big injector connector. It's a pretty big connector, you can't miss it. It's easier than trying to unplug each connector individually. Take that off, and then you can go ahead, take the coil off, and then take the head off, or the valve cover off, and then undo the head and the torque sequence, in the reverse of the torque sequence when you torque the head on. That should help prevent and minimize any head warpage that happens when the head comes off. I've seen a couple of heads warp because the bolts were undone in the wrong sequence. I can't stress that enough. I've had it stressed to me before, and it's always a good practice to always undo a head in the reverse order of the torque sequence of putting the head on. of bolting the head on. So the other thing you're going to need to do is disconnect the cam sensor, any IAC, TPS sensor. There's a couple grounds and a map sensor, but my map sensor is on an adapter block that I had made for. I am willing and able to make some more of those if people are interested. Just send me a message or give me a comment and I'll get with you and we'll talk about it. As of right now, that's where it sits. The other thing I will highly stress, that I can't really stress enough either, is always disconnect your battery when you do this, because if somebody accidentally turns the engine over with the time belt off, there goes your valves, if any are sticking open. So always disconnect the battery before you do a cylinder head job. You may say, I don't want to lose all the memory or presets in my radio. Well, I hate to say it, but tough shit. Excuse my language, but tough shit, deal with it. Write all your presets down, then do it. I know it's a pain to redo it all, but I've done it many times and I don't like it either. But it saves me from arcing anything out and saving the battery. That's where I stand right now. Oh shit, my hair's in there. That burned. The next couple days, I'm going to get the head off. It shouldn't be that difficult. I just need to spend another hour. The whole job in the book pays about 4.5, 5 hours to do on and off. That does not include machine time. Oh, my sticker's coming off. Oh, I'll figure there's something out with that. But since it's my personal project, I can work on it little by little. Do know if you do take the head in machine shop, leave the spark plugs in. They have to machine the head before you put it back on, because if you machine the head, it's perfect flatness and you don't have to worry about the gasket not sealing right. You'll have to replace the spark plugs after the machining. They request that the plugs still be in the head when they machine it, for pressure testing purposes and for when they mill the head. When you also have the head off, it's a good time to replace any seals, like your front cam seals, the valve stem seals, any seal that, or any galley plug that needs to be replaced or has any signs of leakage, seepage, is now a good time to do it. But like I said, that's where we stand. We'll have more, and I'll show you exactly how this exactly works when we come back. Okay guys, it's another night. It's about 2 days later. It is November 30th. One thing I did forget to mention, when you're doing a cylinder head removal, or a timing belt, you're going to need to remove the cross member that's underneath. Those are two 14mm bolts, and then I believe the other should be 17. The tools that I've been using so far have been a combination wrench and basic socket set metric. A lot of the bolts are all metric on this car. You'll need a 10mm wrench socket. The socket, you probably might get away better with a 1/4 inch drive and 3/8 inch drive, short and deep. You'll need a 13, a 14, a 12. There's a couple 12s in there. Of course, these are all in wrenches, sockets as well. You'll need a 17mm for the mounting bolts for the front of the engine, in front of the timing gears. You'll need a 19mm for the harmonic balancer bolt, as well as both the cam gear bolts. You'll need, really the range is between 8 and 10 mil, or not 8 and 10 mil, I'm sorry. Mad Professor's tired from a long day of work. You'll need a 8mm up to, I believe, a 19, really. There's nothing bigger unless you're getting into something really extreme. The when you're I forgot to mention as well, for the fuel line disconnect for fuel rail on the factory, they're both, I believe they're both 8s or 10 millimeters. It's easier to just connect it at the fuel rail instead of going for the flare fitting on the firewall, because that has a tendency to seize sometimes. I've also been using a 15 millimeter ratchet, a 12 millimeter flex ratchet head, as well as a 15 millimeter flex ratchet head wrenches. That's really all the tools I have been using for this. You may need a couple pliers here and there, maybe some sort of cutting tool like a razor blade for some things here and there if you need to split a hose if you're going to replace it, or if it's just not coming off, you're just going to have to replace it anyways. I will make note, if you're doing a timing belt, now is the time to replace this front camshaft seals and the front crankcase seal or front crankshaft seal or main seal, because they do, after 100,000 miles, they're going to start getting brittle and then they're going to start to leak, and now's the time to do it. I will show you how to put the cam seals in. The crank seal is pretty much the same, it's just you got to dangle it a little bit more, because the lip of the seal, you can actually, on the crankshaft one, you can actually roll and cause havoc. And then you have a big ass leak and you'll wonder why it's leaking from there again. I've used, for my turbo manifold studs, for the exhaust manifold, they're 10 millimeter 12 point, as well as the intake. The intake and exhaust studs are actually identical. So I have two sets of exhaust manifold stainless steel studs from ARP, one for intake, one for exhaust. Alright, so for those with mechanical timing tensioners, you'll need a 13 millimeter to loosen the nut and another 1/4 inch drive to loosen the tensioner. I believe you'll turn it clockwise, whereas counterclockwise is to tighten it for the tensioner, and then basically snug the nut down to hold it. It's basically the same. Not the same, but righty tighty, lefty loosey. So for those with hydraulic tensioners, just unloosen the two bolts and remove them, and the tensioner loses all its tension. You'll have to decompress the tensioner in a vise and put a pin into it, or some drill bit that's the same size as the holes. You'll need to line the holes up for sure. Or if you're replacing the hydraulic tensioner, it already comes with a pin in it. Just set your timing, get the tensioner on there, and put it in. Make sure your time marks are correct, and then pull the pin. Rotate the motor two times clockwise and check it. Rotate it another 2 times clockwise. Line your marks up again, check it, and if it's all good twice, you're on the money. Do be note that you can get one that, I've done this before and this has happened to me. I've gotten the intake cam one tooth off and retard and caused, or no, advance, and it caused lower vacuum reading than normal. But it ran, but it didn't have as much power. It had a slight decrease in power, but that's okay. So let's get to it. As you can see, the power steering pump, I've just flopped up and over where it sits now. You'll need to disconnect your sensors for your temp gauge, I believe I might have said this all before, as well as the computer here. You'll need to, coil's going to have to come off anyways, so we'll remove the coil. We'll have to disconnect the upper heater core hose. That's all got to come off. Or if you don't want to mess with that hose, just undo the 3 bolts that are in here. You'll undo this bolt that's there just below the hose clamp, and then there'll be, and then this way you don't have to mess with thermostat if you had a brand new one put in recently. This one, and then the one above it there just behind the timing cover. So those three are going to have to come out. And I've got brand new gaskets coming for this. You're always going to have to replace gaskets if you do this. If you're using gaskets because you have no choice, just be aware you're going to have to change it sooner or later again. So you might as well bite the bullet and do it. As for note with the spark plugs, it was running really too rich, as you can see all the sulfur on it. That's because during cruise it was reading and pegging, maxing out my air fuel ratio gauge over 10:1, and I figured out my problem with that. It had to do with the software. I was adding fuel in the fuel table where it shouldn't be, and should have been adding it on the acceleration correction table for fuel adding. Alright, so when you take the mount out, you're going to have to put a jack with a block of wood underneath the engine. My jack sucks because it doesn't reach as high as the ones I have at the shop that I work with. So I've stacked a few blocks onto it. One thing I do love about my jack is that it's lightweight and it pumps up really fast. So take a little pressure with the motor off the mount. A little bit, that's all you really need. But before we take the mount off, I'm just going to get some of this other accessory stuff off, and then that way if I just need to let the jack down, I can get it. Another thing you'll need to do is you'll need to disconnect your throttle cable. Those with cruise control or manual without cruise control, it's basically the same. Just there's two 10mm bolts up in here on the intake. Just take those off and it comes right out. Okay, let's get to it. Oh, my hands are cold already. If you're not sure where some things go back together, a good hint is to take pictures of it and mark a bag or put some card in it with writing on it where it came from. That way you get a reminder where it came from and you know where to put it back. Because I've ran into problems like that where I've had scratched my head for about 10 minutes and then realized where it went. Okay. So I've got a lot more stuff to undo because I've modified quite a bit, and there's some stuff that does require more attention and detail to it. For instance, this manifold or manifold absolute pressure sensor or MAP adapter block I made. I've also got I've ordered, I'll tell you now, I've tried the Simtech Labs FCD Fuel Cut Defender. and it is by far the worst piece of shit garbage I've ever bought. It is the worst. I tried it and it sucks. I tried to adjust it. You can't adjust it with shit on here. So I'm not too particularly happy about it. So I've got another one from a different company, and we're going to try that. As for these wiring harness, I'm just going to try to get some of these out of my way this way. One of these I've got to hold to the side. The other I've got to, well, since this sensor's coming out of here, I really don't care about cutting this goddamn thing. This one I'm just going to pull off to the side. This wire is only hot with power or accessory on. I made it that way. So I'm just going to set that up and out of there. This wiring harness that contains the pre-Cat O2 sensor has got to come out. It also has the plug for the AC coil, clutch coil. It's also, this other harness that I made has the plug-in. I gotta get this out of here. If y'all remember from the swap videos, I have the air-fuel ratio and the EGT on this harness. This EGT, the connector is actually inside the car, so that's a little tough to get out. But if I need to, I can cut and splice out here. It's not such a big deal, but anyway. So you have your AC, clutch coil, and pressure sensor. You'll have your pre-Cat O2 power steering pressure sensor or switch to tell the computer to idle up when you're turning the wheel. Your ECT gauge reading for the instrument cluster, the computer ECT reading. So this harness is just really going to come up and out and fold over. It's just going to fold over that way. There's really no big need to have it sitting there anyway. Where's that tin now? Got a lovely snow on there. Some of these stuff I still have to find homes for, and I still have to mess with. Like the Grady boost pressure sensor, I still have to find a home for. I still have to find a home for a few other things. Okay. Now, if you're going to remove the engine or trans, it'd be a good idea to remove the battery tray. Those, I believe, are 12 millimeters in there. They're 10 on top and 12 for the bracket below the tray. And those are a pain to line up correctly. Okay, so, and I have seen a light has turned on this. There. I'm sorry it's dark, it's winter. Winter's not the favorite time. Well, it's favorite, but it's not the best time to be working in a garage outside with no heat. Okay, so that is for actuator, boost controller. I know where those go. parts pile. One of my mistakes I had to fix after I started the engine is I actually looped the positive crankcase ventilation, or PCV, and that took out the front crank seal, so that I was not happy about. But I got that fixed in. I've got a oil catch breather, if you want to call it, in the left front fender well. There's plenty of room to put it there, so that's where I left it. Just a couple rivet nut inserts, and voila, for the hole and put the insert in. It's a really nifty tool. It's really cool. Put that hose there. All right. Okay, coil's got to come on. The coil is 10mm bolts. They don't have to be in there that tight. They just got to be snug and stay on. The connector is sometimes a bit hard to get off, but I have a MSD, and that makes it a little bit easier because the connector is not as stiff. As you can see, I'm taking parts off and setting them aside. I've got a parts pile. Make sure you set any parts that you take off to the side in a place where nobody's going to step on them. That will save you. If somebody steps on one of the parts and you can't get one for another 2 weeks, well, I'm sorry to tell you, hate to say it, but you're gonna, this will be SOL. What do I need? I need a 13. So the other thing you'll probably need is some extensions. There are wobbly extensions out there, and those you might need as well. I've ran into a few areas that they make life look so much easier than trying to fight one thing without it. Trying to come up with a way to do it without it. Otherwise you'd be stuck with a wrench trying to get in there. Okay. And then when you put everything back together, make sure you use a torque wrench and torque everything to spec. I can't stress that enough. I mean, like something like the ignition coil, that just has to be snug and then vary ever slightly a little bit more. But I mean, something like the cylinder head or anything coolant or pressure related, make sure you torque it, because it will be such a pain if you don't, leak, or even worse, it may not even seal forever. Okay. I wish I had more light, but this is about all the light I have. Or I find another light. That's the right way. This is pain. There. A little more light, if you can see. Okay, I'll be right back. Gotta split the file. Okay, so camera battery is almost dead too. We're back. Same day, same night. As you can see, I've been busy removing stuff while the camera charged. I've got the throttle cable off. I've got anything on the head that needs to be removed already. I've worked with the vacuum lines. I was going to take them off the manifold, then it's like, no, they're a little bit of a pain when I put them on. So I disconnect them at the locations where necessary. So I'm at the point where, if you all remember the connector I was talking about for the injector, this is the connector right here. That is the connector. It's buried down in here somewhere. It might be hanging off from the manifold, but that is the connector you are going for. It makes it so much easier than having to undo each injector individually and get the harness out. So that's it. Just one connector for all that. It's off. I've already disconnected my fuel lines. They're all in braided stainless steel lines. So so now we're just moving on. I've already got the valve cover bolts undone. These are 8mm. They'll need an 8mm deep for these ones. There might be a few zip ties here and there that I might have to clip. I'll get to those. I can't really get them from underneath because I got so much stuff buried under there right at the moment, and I don't feel like crawling under there and getting it all out. I'm at the point where I can take the timing off, or mount and take the timing belt off. So again, all we're going to do is have a little tension on it. Take a 17mm. You'll need a 17mm swivel for the through bolt from the body to the mount, and then just a regular deep from the mount to the engine mounting bracket that's on the front of the motor. Where's the cup for this one? Those bolts. What are these? Do not remember those. I'm having a brain fart here at the moment. Kind of look like underside. Oh, those are the cross member bolts. Okay. Do I have another cut for these? No, that's not it. That's not it. There's a power steering. I seem to have lost a couple bolts somewhere, it looks like. Nope. Yeah, I was looking for that. That showed up. Good. I just need the washer. Okay, well, I can't seem to find the other cup. That's the mount. 19. I don't know. Well, anyways, I'm going to start a different cup for these. I'll find the other ones eventually. There's there. So, another thing I've also liked and tried is just plastic cups right on it, and then put the parts in and tape it shut. Or somehow seal it. Makes everything a heck of a lot easier to find things. Now, these I just had in here kind of snug, and some of them are hand tight. So it makes it so much easier to get out. Okay, there's that. And this one down here. Oh my god, what did I do to this one? I must have snugged it pretty good. Great, we're almost out of time on this card. Jesus Christ. Looks like I gotta unload some things. Okay, well, basically from here I'll tell you that from here it's just getting timing off, and I'll have to show you. This camera's not so good for recording. It doesn't take more than 30 minutes, and then a card just fills up with so many videos I've already taken over the past year. Well, I'll have to be back again. Alright, I had a camera failure again. File corrupted on the last part of the removal for the cylinder head. So, as you last saw, you got to take the mount out of your way, take the time belt off, take the valve cover off, undo all the cylinder head bolts and the reversed torque sequence, as I've said before, and the head should just pop up and off. You may have some difficulty with the back timing cover still being in place doing it that way, but it's doable. It really is. So pretty much it's all off now. I've gotten the intake off, and the installation is pretty much the reverse of the removal. Just make sure you follow all your torque sequences and do it from there. If you have some questions or comments, don't be afraid to ask me. This is pretty much straightforward of how do you do the cylinder head. I've had my difficulties with it, and I know you will as well. I know this is like 6 months later during this recording. I just haven't gotten around to doing any video editing. I've been really concerned with getting the car back together. So right now this video is coming out really late, and so will the next video that I'll be posting here shortly. So this is pretty much how you do the cylinder head removal. I hope this helps you for whoever requested it. I don't remember your username. I apologize, but I've had so much other things going on than the car, so so right now it's all back together. I'll have another video out shortly of other things and updates. So like I said, I don't like the camera when it does this failure stuff to me. So usually when you have a cylinder head, I do highly suggest that you have it decked, at least get it flat enough, so you can, when you bolt it back on, you don't have to worry about any leakages or anything. So, but for all those who continue to watch and wait for the updates, I do appreciate it. I hope you enjoy these videos as much as I like to try to make them as best I can. The one thing I will put up front there, I may be right, I may be wrong with some of this stuff. I openly admit this. I, this car has been a little bit of a headache for me, but it has not stopped me from keep trying and trying. I've gotten really close lately, and you'll see in the next video for what it is. So, I thank you for all your continued support and watching the videos. The one thing I do want to put out there is that if you don't like the videos, I don't force you to watch them. Please, no, don't make any rude comments to me or anything like that. The other thing I do ask about is that if you don't like it, I know there's the dislike button, but you know, if you don't like them, don't watch them. That's all I really have to put out there. I've been getting really frustrated with this lately, and it's partially also why I haven't put any videos out there. It's because those who dislike my videos, it's kind of discouraging. It really is. I put a lot of time and effort into all these videos for you guys, and to get a dislike, it's like, really? Hey, please, come on. I put a lot of time and effort, like I've said, and it's kind of BS. So, I've pretty much almost got to the point where I just don't want to do this anymore because of it. So, on a different note, if any of you want to know where I've gotten some of the parts, please feel free to ask me. I have some parts suppliers I got them from, and some of the parts I've made myself and had made for me at an expense, so they're not cheap. That pretty much does it for cylinder head R&R. It's a bit of a grueling process, but if you do it a couple times, you get used to it. So, pretty much until next time.